Hey, dreamers, welcome back to your Dream Coach podcast. This is where we talk about what it really takes to build a life and a business that you love. I'm Shayla Wey, and today I am tackling a topic that keeps so many people stuck, and that's fear. And fear is sneaky. It disguises itself as logic, as being responsible, even as waiting for the right time. But here's what I found is that fear is a liar. It whispers doubts, it inflates risks, and it convinces you to stay small. And if you let it, fear will keep you from the dreams, the opportunities, and the success that is meant for you. So today, I'm breaking down why fear lies, how it holds you back, and most importantly, how to move through it so that you can take risks and you can win. And fear magnifies the worst case scenario. One of the biggest things I've realized is that fear makes everything bigger and scarier than it actually is. I used to build these worst case scenarios in my head. What if I fail? What if people judge me? What if I lose money? But when I actually listed out the worst that could happen, I saw how manageable those risks really were. And most fears are just exaggerations. And so when you confront them, they shrink. And this is something that I still do for myself. I work with a lot of clients on when they're in this decision making process to go through this exercise where we write down what are all the facts and then what are all the feelings. And let's make a decision based on the facts, right? Not versus the fear that sometimes can take over. And taking risks is the only way to grow. I mean, I've never met a successful person who didn't take risks. In fact, every major success in my own life has come from stepping into the unknown. When I started in direct sales when I was 21 years old, I'd never made a call before to a client. I'd never sold something one-on-one. I'd never gotten referrals. Like I had never done any of that. And I remember feeling terrified. There wasn't any guarantees. There was no safety nets, but there was something in me that just knew that if I didn't take that step forward and didn't at least try, how was I ever going to get the skills of grit and growth and sales and being able to connect with people and confidence and speaking, all the skills that, in my time doing direct sales, I earned, right? I earned those skills from stepping out of my comfort zone and then later growing that into a district where I led a whole team of people and then growing that to a division where I led several offices across the country into two divisions, where at one point I had over 30 offices across the country I live in Canada and led that to a multi-million-dollar organization. And then pivoting again to transitioning out of direct sales to continue to build my coaching company. And now scaling this at a other level where now we're going to be rolling out memberships and taking things to the next level. And so I've just learned that if we wait to feel ready, we will wait forever. And so taking risks is a muscle. And so the more you do it, the stronger that you get. And fear disguises itself as being responsible. And man, this one really hit me. I used to convince myself that I wasn't scared. I was just being smart. But what I found was that playing it safe often meant just staying stuck. Of course, I do believe in making informed decisions, but if responsibility always keeps you from taking action, that's not wisdom. That's fear in disguise. And there's a difference between being reckless and trusting yourself enough to to bet on your own dreams. The first step is always the hardest, but it gets easier. I can't tell you how many times I've procrastinated on something just because the first step felt overwhelming. I just went through this a few weeks ago. I'm working with a business coach. I'm, growing up. I'm building and growing out my school and my membership platform, for these coming months. And getting ready to launch this and building is terrifying. It's overwhelming. And I know that it's what I want, but it's truly, a few weeks ago, I was there where that first step felt so overwhelming. But what I found is that the hardest part is just starting. And so once I just got clear again on my vision and my goals for my business, it's so much easier just to take that first leap. And whether that's sending the email, it's making the call, and then eventually launching the business, you realize it wasn't as terrifying as you thought. And once you're in motion, momentum just carries you forward. And fear thrives in isolation. So talk about it. One of the biggest shifts for me was realizing that fear loses its power when you say it out loud. I used to keep my fears to myself, thinking I had to deal with them alone. But what what I found is that when I've talked to mentors, friends, other business owners, my business coach, I saw that everyone has fears. And I still see that every day when I'm doing coaching and working, doing consulting calls. And often just voicing them has made them feel less overwhelming. I literally was on a call right before recording this podcast where I'm talking to my coach about some of the concerns I have and questions. And as I just finished saying everything, I just instantly felt so much better. I was like, oh, it's actually, I can do that. Okay. And so find people who can remind you that you're not alone. Failing isn't the end, it's the beginning of learning. And for so long, I thought failure was the worst thing that could happen. But what I found is that failure is just feedback. So every failure I've had, whether it's been, something in my business that didn't go as planned, or maybe it was a decision that backfired, an investment that I made, or maybe I fell short on time, it taught me something valuable. And the people who win aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones who don't let failure stop them. And your brain is wired to avoid risk, but you can rewire it. I used to think that fear was a sign that something was wrong. But then I learned that our brains are actually wired to resist change. Our primitive brain, right? Our primitive brain, if you want to say that, it sees anything unfamiliar as dangerous, even if it's a good opportunity. And what I found is that the more you expose yourself to taking risks, the more your brain adapts. And what once felt terrifying eventually feels normal. And so the people you admire are no different than you. One of the biggest wake-up calls I had was realizing that the people I look up to weren't fearless. Fearless. They just acted despite their fears. And I used to think they had something I didn't. They had more confidence, more talent, more resources. But what I found is that the only real difference was they took action. And the sooner you realize that no one is more ready than you, the sooner you'll start stepping into your own power. And playing it safe is still a risk. And here's what really shifted my mindset. Staying in my comfort zone wasn't actually safe. When I avoided risks, I wasn't avoiding failure. I was just guaranteeing that nothing could change. And what I found is that playing it safe is its own kind of risk. It's the risk of staying small, of never knowing what could have been, and settling for less than you're capable of. And to me, that's the scariest thing of all. And action is, honestly, it's the antidote of fear. If I had to sum it all up in one truth, it's this: fear hates action. The more you sit in fear, the bigger it gets. But the moment you do something, even if it's small, fear starts to fade. And I found that every time I've taken action despite being scared, I've proven to myself that I'm capable. The only way to overcome fear is to move through it. And so fear is a liar. It tells you you're not ready, that you'll fail, that you should wait. But here's the truth. Okay? The truth is you're more ready than you think. The opportunities, the success, the life you want, it's all on the other side of taking that risk. So here's my challenge for you. Identify one thing fear has been holding you back from. Maybe it's launching that idea, making that pitch, or finally stepping into the next level of your business. Whatever it is, take action this week. Even if it's just a baby step, start moving through the fear. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs this reminder. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and leave a review. It helps more people like you break free from fear and go after their dreams. Remember, you were made for more. Fear is a liar. And the only way to win is to take the risk. I'll see you next time on Your Dream Coach podcast.